It isn't right. We never met before, but then.
Hi. Hello to everybody out there. Thank you for stopping by for a quick listen to the Music on the Open Road podcast. This is where Protection of Human Right 27 for today's songwriter, musician, and performer takes center stage.
And when we're gathered, I'll pass buttons out that say, beautiful people. And then you'll never have to be alone, 'cause there'll always be someone with us.
Hello and welcome to everybody out there. I'm so glad that you're here. Today's episode is the Article 27 Music Project, and this is episode number 5 of the podcast's first season. My name is Corinne, and I am very happy to speak to you as your podcast's hostess. I've had so many adventures putting together the episodes leading up to this particular episode. Just to recap where we are at so far in the season, Episode 1, Born to Be, I jumped on my opportunity to reintroduce you all to platinum recording artist, internationally acclaimed songwriter Melanie. And together we listened to Melanie speak to us and tell us about meeting her husband, manager, and lifelong music producer, Peter Currier, at the Brill Building in New York City. They made a pact that day in Hugo and Luigi's offices to never, never, never sell the rights to Melanie's music. And in the next episode, episode 2, Neighborhood Records, well, that was a fun hour spent taking the roof off of America's first mainstream independent record label, Neighborhood Records, launched in 1971. Located in Manhattan, Melanie's music production company was the first one ever a mainstream songwriter successfully launched and ran for 4 glorious years, selling 4 million copies of the record label's first release, Gather Me. And in episode 2, Melanie, the recording star, she spoke about how wonderful it was to finally share her music without industry interference on her own record label. Throughout Neighborhood Records, Peter continued to produce Melanie's work. And as far as inspiration goes, Melanie was all about the Beatles, who were sort of leading the way with their record label, Apple, and she fell into their footsteps. The ramifications of the inspirational works by this husband and wife duo of Peter and Melanie Currier should be a mini-series in itself. And I hope somebody will get inspired and, agree that would be a worthwhile project to spend their time making. Melanie and Peter were practically teaching the major corporations, people who today would be like Sony and Universal Music, how to sell music, how to present music, marketing and packaging. And they were all about the sound and all about the times that they were living in. One thing I didn't mention in that episode is that during those Neighborhood Records years, both Elton John and Bruce Springsteen passed the paths of the Curriers and were possible artists who would or could have been signed, though fate took them both in other directions. Peter Currier, as a recordman and a music salesman, was an extraordinary business person, and he was showing the big people how to be positively, smashingly, fantastically, magnificently, sometimes even atrociously successful. I'm being a little funny, but the truth is that anyone alive today from the 1970s was familiar with how much power Melanie, the artist, yielded through her art, and they were overjoyed to work with Melanie. In episode 3, entitled An Evening with Melanie, well, you and I, we kind of found a seat, didn't we, in the New York City Metropolitan Opera House on a February evening in 1974 to experience Melanie's live performance with the sold-out audience. Less than a handful of artists have been invited to that particular New York City auditorium to grace its stage. What brings Melanie to these settings, and what makes Melanie unique? It's all presented in episode 3, An Evening with Melanie. And then last week's episode, number 4, Gather Me, is named after that very first Neighborhood Records album. And I think it might be the single best-selling independent record in the history of independent music. Something to check out there, but it did sell 4 million copies between 1971 and when the record label shut down. Episode 4, though, in truth, is like an hour of begging because I'm begging and pleading you out there to enjoy the satisfactory traits and timbres of Melanie the performer and songwriter. Because today, in May 2023, Melanie is not paid at all. Melanie is a star in search of a ladder. And to me, because I am a fan and because I am inspired, I do seek 51% of American populations to arrange themselves in Melanie's favor so as to return to her millions and millions of dollars and success from that recording industry rip-off. It's all owed back to Melanie's pockets. Uncountable stolen paychecks. To whom did they accrue? Unscrupulous businessmen and women in parking lots and sitting crouched under toll bridges. That was episode number 4. So here we are, episode 5, the Article 27 Music Project. With the hope that it will all make enough sense so far, I am walking the path to a long upward staircase.
Beautiful people. And then you'll never have to be alone, 'cause there'll always be someone with the same button on as you.
The work I've put into Article 27 Music started around March of 2019. It continues to this day. And I'm working under the title of Article 27 Music and the Article 27 Music Project, as well as Human Right 27 for songwriters, musicians, and performers, the latter being the title for the not-for-profit organization. Because when I started, I just wanted to have some sort of a corporate status as I move forward, working out exactly what I was trying to accomplish on Melanie's behalf. At first, I was contacted by Melanie, and she relayed the situation wherein she was not being regularly paid, or actually wasn't being paid anything at all, unless somehow a request made it through to her, which was usually accidental. And pretty much in every case, even when a request to use one of her recordings that she paid for, the studio time, hired the musicians, her husband produced the music, it was released on her record label. Even when someone actually got through and contacted her, they would, within, a day or a week or, before the deal could be established, they would be directed to seek out Sony Music. And this was infuriating Melanie because she didn't know why Sony was involved at all, and was, witnessing really, the use of her music that constituted hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. And that was back in 2010 after Peter's passing. So by 2019, she was just, the going was rough and she wanted to get it resolved. And so I made a trip to Tennessee, and Melanie and I sat and spoke in her living room for a little while. And amongst various important information and details that she relayed to me, she let me know that she had a collection of original master recordings that were in upstate New York, and that her sister had helped her get them stored with a friend, and for quite some time she had needed to move them. And Melanie expressed to me that she was concerned that the tapes had been rotted through or, had been damaged in some way due to being stored in an attic and then in a barn, and that they were about 50 years old by that time. So getting anything transferred from them would be questionable. And there's a lot of logistics involved in caring for those types of audio reels and transporting them correctly, as well as saving what you can from, mice that might have eaten into the boxes, mildew, bugs, all that sort of thing. So it was quite a task, and she let me know that that was something that wasn't a priority for her at that moment. But around that time period, there was a very important investigative report that had been published in the New York Times detailing the loss of an estimated 150,000 master tapes, which was something like 500,000 songs. And this was a fire that occurred on the grounds of Universal Studios in Hollywood, California. And it was published, I believe, in June of 2019, and I read it almost immediately. The title of the article is "The Day the Music Burned," and it was written by Jody Rosen. And the information in it was mind-boggling. Such important legacy artists whose music was now burned. So it was around that time that I learned about this collection of tapes that were stored incorrectly in the attic of an antique warehouse, and before that, for about 10, 20 years, had been in the attic of a garage. And I made a decision while I was talking to Melanie that I was going to find out what was the real underlying reason that she wasn't being paid when she felt that she should be. And what evoked this passion was that I love Melanie's music, and she is such a well-intended person that it was really disheartening to witness what was happening in her life while watching, very, very, very large companies basically exploit these recordings that she had paid for, and the songs and the melody and the lyrics that she had written all on her own. So I had to return to Oregon, and when I made my next trip back out to Tennessee, on the way there, I just got off the plane in New York City, and I rented a truck, and I went up to the barn, and Melanie arranged with her sister to have me pick up this treasure trove of original Neighborhood Records audio reels. And there really wasn't any place to store them that was convenient for anyone. And I was living in Oregon as I am today, so I brought them all the way back to Oregon. And during that time, I ended up connecting with Brooks Arthur, who was one of the original studio engineers who handled probably about a half or a third of the recordings that I had picked up in New York. And he advised on how to care for the tapes and to do what was best, what could be done at this point to salvage them. He recommended that I contact a studio, a laboratory in New Jersey, which is called Sonycraft A2DX Laboratory, and deal with the owner, Kevin, in order to save these tapes, because they have an advanced cleaning technology. It's like a proprietary technology that was developed by the individuals who formed the company a few decades before that, and they do a superior job because they focus first on cleaning and maintaining the tape itself, and then put it into a condition where it can be transferred more times than just once, or maybe a second pass through if you're lucky, which is what occurs if you simply bake the tape, because you're baking on sound particles into the tape, and that will give you a lesser rendition of sound after the tape is transferred. So I felt like it was worth it to figure out getting this done and to get whatever tapes we could to Kevin in order to send them through this process. And from that, we were able to save some of Melanie's incredibly beautiful live performances from the 70s, from the Neighborhood Records time period. And we also captured gorgeous studio work that was done by Peter, producing Melanie in Studio 914, Electric Ladyland, and one or two other studios that Peter had sought out due to their, reputation in the New York music scene in the early 1970s. So at that point, with these saved reels and with these audio transfers fresh off the reels that had been stored away ever since Neighborhood Records had closed its doors in 1974-75, I felt like we now had something that we could bring to the market for the first time in a long time and generate income that might help Melanie's household and also hopefully would, drive this project forward and hopefully bring educational information to other songwriters, musicians, and performers as like an analysis of the industry between the time of Neighborhood Records and today, and also a statement of, well, this is factually what occurred in Melanie's life, and she's an incredible subject to study because of her reputation and because of her output. She's an Emmy Award-winning songwriter, and she has about 20 hits that she penned herself. Talent, since she was 10 years old and taught herself to play the ukulele and the guitar. I just felt like it was a wise choice of artist to study, to say, well, these are the pitfalls right now that successful musicians and performers and songwriters deal with when they are just simply trying to put in an honest day's work and be able to receive their payments without interference.
You take care of him, well, maybe he'll take care of you, 'cause all of the beautiful people do, and I'm a beautiful people too.
A letter from Melanie, dated Tuesday, June 11th, 2019. What I know or knew to be true. When I first signed to ASCAP, I was told it represents the writer, me. They protected me and made certain I would be paid for the songs I wrote. ASCAP was the organization that protected the writer. I was educated by the ASCAP representative who drew a pie and divided it into quarters, showing me half the pie was 100% of the publishing. The writer's share was the other half of the pie. Even if you sell your publishing, you still retain the writer's share. You never sell that. That is what stays with you and goes to your children, etc. I joined in 1968 and have always believed ASCAP was my protective agency as a writer, and until my husband's death, I believed these truths. I retained the writer's share, or rights. When the information came to me, post my husband recording producer, since Record One manager and eventual agent passed away, I discovered these rights without my knowledge had been sold. The words used were rights to collect on writer's membership, assigning rights to collect to my husband. This does not say I am selling my writer's share. This does not translate me, the writer, because ASCAP is the writer's organization, that I was selling my writer's share. The part that gets left to pass down to my family and allow me, as many of my songs were successful, a steady stream of income, something to live on if I could no longer perform. Again, when my husband passed, many people, even in the music industry, said, "No, I don't think it's possible to sell your writer's rights." Some were British and in England. That is true. Peter, my husband, and I had a traditional marriage, raised 3 children, at that time had 2 grandchildren, had never been asked nor signed a power of attorney. That, coupled with everything I had been told concerning writers' rights and publishing, led me into this situation. I am the sole writer of Brand New Key, Lay Down Candles in the Rain, Beautiful People, Look What They've Done to My Song Ma. All have been used in countless commercials and movies. I had always believed, while my husband was alive, that I earned some profits from these, my songs. Somewhere in my true story, there is a wrongdoing, not only by my husband, and to what degree perhaps I will never know, but by ASCAP. I've heard many times now from writers who have knowingly sold their writer's share. I've never heard it referred to as a writer's membership, meaning rights or share. That ASCAP meets with them, and it's a big deal, as they want to be sure the writer isn't being coerced and knows exactly what will transpire. When this deal was made, I was never notified, not one communication, not a letter or a phone call. I found out after the fact. Throughout our 43 years of marriage, Peter made many publishing deals, but I never sold my writer's share. I did not sell my writer's share. This is true. Melanie Shakarik.
I'm thinking what I'm doing, and I'm thinking what I done, and I'm thinking.
The first question that came to mind when Melanie presented her situation to me was, what was ASCAP's response when you asked for your missing payments? And she handed me what is entitled Letter of Indemnification for Irrevocable Assignment to Family Members, Not-for-Profit, Foundation, or Charity. She said that ASCAP had given her this form in 2011, which was about a year following Peter's passing. And when I spoke to Melanie's daughter, Layla Heyman Shakarik, who also was trying to help her mother after her father's passing, she let me know that she had also received this same letter. And what it is it's a form that is has 2 pages, and it says it's basically where a songwriter can bestow. I'll read you the first paragraph. It says, I, blank, the assigner, have requested that effective as of date, a certain percentage of royalties attributable to my writer membership in the American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers, ASCAP, be irrevocably assigned and transferred to my spouse or parents, children, siblings, not-for-profit foundation, or charity. The assignees. And then later it says, I, as assigner, and my assignees acknowledge and understand that the assignment is limited to the right to receive royalties only and does not extend to any other right of membership in ASCAP, including but not limited to the right to vote. We further acknowledge that and understand that the assignment is subject to all obligations, rules, and regulations which bind ASCAP members, including but not limited to ASCAP's distribution rules as they exist at the time of the assignment, and as they may be modified thereafter. So this goes on for about a page. And so the first thing that is odd about this particular form is that Melanie said that she never did assign all of her library basically to Peter Shakarik. That was the first thing. You know, she said, if I had even signed this form, it would not have been what was presented to me because I was never informed about bestowing my library upon anyone. So that's the most telling piece of information and the most evidence I think ASCAP would need that something is seriously wrong. So the second part that is seriously wrong about this documentation, because this documentation represents now millions of dollars that have been directed away from Melanie and to BMG, because that's who ultimately this money is now being paid today. First, it was diverted to Quartet Music, and then to a corporation called Bug Music, and then ultimately to BMG Music. So the thing that is scary about this is that right on the front page, it says in tiny little letters in parentheses, please complete this schedule if assignment is an irrevocable assignment by a living writer member. Please note a notarized signature is needed for an irrevocable assignment by the assigner. So this document that Melanie was sent and her daughter was sent, and then in 2019, I sent an email to someone who was recommended to Melanie to deal with in the New York ASCAP office, whose name is Seth, and he deals in global membership. He also sent me this form as well. So that's 3 different people who have been sent this form. And it says on the front page it needs to be notarized. Well, it's not notarized. There are 2 different lines that can be notarized on this form. The first is Melanie's signature. It has a notarization line on it. And the second is Peter's signature, which also has a notarization line on it. Neither of them are actually notarized. Okay, so that says everything. First, you have the songwriter herself, who has contacted ASCAP and said, I did not sign this form, and if for any reason it was in a pile of papers and I did sign it, it was never presented to me for what it is. Okay, so, and then secondly, it's not notarized. Okay, so then the third very, very obvious flaw in all of this paperwork is that it is assigned to Peter Shakarik on the 23rd day of May 2003. And on the front page, the little form is filled in for the 31st of August 2003. So several months later, the front page is filled in. So Melanie said this is not as it should be, and I would like to have it addressed. And it actually took a little while to get a letter from ASCAP that acknowledged the oddity of the situation. But what the letter that she received from ASCAP read was, you have 2 payment periods to hire a lawyer, hire an attorney, and file a lawsuit against this company. Now, when Melanie contacted ASCAP, she said, we've been trying to get my royalty sorted out for something like, 8 years, and we've been ignored. Now Peter's gone, and I want this resolved completely. So now they're saying, here's paperwork you haven't seen. It's been on file with our company since 2003, diverting away all of your quarterly payments for your writer's share. And you can't receive it. And if you don't hire an attorney and file a lawsuit against BMG, then we're going to ignore you. And this is in 2011, which is, about a little over a decade ago. The music industry was a completely different scenario at that time. That's before the Music Modernization Act. And it is at a time period when these major corporations, such as Sony and BMG, were really swimming. What are they going to do? What are they going to do to resolve their issues? Where you have a lot of artists really being able to now step out from under the pressures and hardships that these record labels were able to bring upon their lives, due to now being able to sell their music freely on their own on the internet. They didn't have to just comply. They could step out on their own. There's more marketing tools available. There's more people that are eager to help them as artists sell their music. And so this is now like, they've got their claws in Melanie's library for however long, since, years before Peter passed. And now they simply send her this document and say, there you go. And you can file a lawsuit. If you do, within the next 2 payment periods, we will continue to not pay the other party. But if you are remiss in filing that lawsuit, then too bad. We continue to pay the other people. So that's what really irked me. I thought, if we're going to have a country that is honest and free, we can't have a situation like this take place with an artist such as Melanie. And that's what got me started.
About my mother, never thought I'd come quite this far from nowhere to hear myself be sung, but I still haven't forgotten I used to do.
The Article 27 Music Project was propped up by a few gentlemen that I must speak of highly, highly, highly now. The first and foremost is the owner and manager of Portland, Oregon's oldest record store, Music Millennium, located on Burnside Avenue. Music Millennium is as historic and important to Portland as Powell's Bookstores, McMenamin's, Voodoo Donuts, and, of course, Nike. Music Millennium is a record store anybody who listens to music has visited at least once in their life if they live in the Pacific Northwest. It was started on March 15th in 1969. They have had the most amazing artists perform there: Richard Thompson, Luscious Jackson, Lorena McKennitt, Maureen McCormick, Blue Rodeo, Shonen Knife, Matthew Sweet, Soundgarden, Mike Watt, Sheryl Crow, Everclear, Jewel, to name a few, Cheap Trick. Terry Currier took over Music Millennium in 1996 after he joined the store as a manager in 1984. Just like any small business, there are so many challenges. And particularly in the music industry, there are piranhas in the water at all times. So Terry Currier started a group called the Coalition of Independent Music Stores. He wanted to create a voice and a support group for independent record stores, especially after big changes in the industry, like when Napster came along. All the stories in the group are from different marketplaces in the United States, and everyone was welcome to share ideas. And creating that coalition helped some of those record stores weather the storms and challenges that face independent music. After Terry and his friends put together their coalition, there were two other coalitions that formed. And at the low point of record stores, those three coalition leaderships met together, and that is how Record Store Day began. And they have used that day to try to ask the industry to get compelling content back on vinyl, which was a format that nobody cared about in the industry by the mid-2000s. Starting Record Store Day really was the turnaround point for the industry, and so much has come back to life as a result of that work to get those titles back onto vinyl and to promote that, the population return to their local record store and purchase music on vinyl. That was such a significant goal for Terry and his colleagues to set, because this electronic, access to music, such as Napster, was taking the young audience completely away from the record stores and all of that record store experience. That is so awesome. Terry is a true gentleman, a real friend. He is a complete character with his frizzy hair that kind of looks like Weird Al Yankovic. And he even actually has his own day, August 12th, that was dedicated to him by former Portland Mayor Bud Clark with an official proclamation, which was actually celebrated at Music Millennium with a customer appreciation barbecue. So he's a local icon, and when I had these tapes, I ended up going to the local record store, and Terry was there, and we had a conversation. And the most incredible thing happened. He shared with me how when he first started working in music in 1972, he purchased Melanie's one of the first records off of Neighborhood Records of another artist, which was $5 Shoes. And he actually had his vinyl $5 Shoes at home, which he brought in and showed to me. So he was very familiar with Melanie and Peter Schickerick, and he distinctly recalled how big of news it was that Melanie had started her own record label. And I let him know about the intention to transfer music from the tapes, and he let me know that that would be really interesting content in his eyes. And once we had transferred Melanie's performance at the Theatre Royal, Drury Lane, which is the oldest performance site in the city of London, he said that that was, precious audio material, and if we could please give him the opportunity to include it in Record Store Day, which was an incredible honor to be acknowledged, to have this work that I was getting started with Melanie be acknowledged in that way. So the next thing to do was to sit with Melanie and talk to her about the possibility of a Record Store Day release. I wanted to work with a sound engineer named Larry Crane, who runs Jackpot Recording Studio in Portland, Oregon, and she was fine with that, and we went ahead with making this beautiful Record Store Day release. Melanie live at Drury Lane, featuring the incredible string bands Robin Williamson and Mike Herron, who at that time were signed to Neighborhood Records. Brief though it may have been, they did a short tour with Melanie in the United Kingdom, and the performance that night at the Theatre Royal Drury Lane featured them along with Melanie for 5 songs. So I had to reach out to them too. It was pressed in this beautiful burgundy color that Melanie selected, and the artwork on the cover is an interesting story. It's by a woman named Sulamith Wolfing, who was a German-born artist who escaped persecution during World War II, and she has this impressive body of work. Melanie's always loved this artist. Until that point, as I was scurrying to get this gatefold jacket designed and all of the files, you have to move all your little text lines and, handle all your little color points. I was working on all of the innards of the album on a Apple computer that had actually been donated especially for that purpose to Melanie. So I was working on that, and then last minute we had this conversation, Googled the artist, and was able to find the woman who actually owns the pieces, and she issued us a license to be able to use the Sulamith Wolfing piece on the front of the Record Store Day release. It was so rewarding to go through the process of having audio that is exceptional, this stellar artist, Terry Currier's interest in whatever was coming off of the audio reels, and to have the participation of the woman who today owns the Sulamith Wolfing Library. All of it just came together into Melanie Live at Drury Lane. And then later there was I put together a CD version of it, which includes a lot more tracks from the show, and I had to put together a whole new dust jacket for the CD, which I thought turned out really, really nice. And it was just, an incredibly rewarding experience being able to do that with these legendary people in independent music.
Still haven't forgotten I used to do it just for fun, when all the ones around me would wonder if they saw or heard me singing somewhere.
Another incredible moment in starting the Article 27 Music Project was contacting Brooks Arthur, the original sound engineer at Melanie's live performance, the New York City Metropolitan Opera House. And Brooks also believes that he was the audio engineer who flew to England to record the Drury Lane performance as well. Brooks Arthur has a very distinguished history in music. He recently, I guess for 3 decades, was the audio engineer for Adam Sandler's production company, which is amazing and fun. And before that, he was working with just absolutely stellar names in the recording industry in New York City. Melanie went to him all throughout the Neighborhood Record years, and he worked with Janis Ian. He was awarded a Grammy for his work with Janis Ian, and he also recorded Bruce Springsteen. So talking to him was a relief. His knowledge was so deep about the industry and about the handling of sound and sound quality. And I do have a little bit of a recording preserved from our conversation. Very, very sadly, I had a body of recordings that were stolen from me by an irate man at the Beach Life Music Festival in 2021. So that is lost. Brooks's conversation, we had an hour or 2 long conversation about music and working with Melanie. That unfortunately is gone, and it breaks my heart to say it to you now, but it is gone. It was on that phone that was taken. But I will say that one of the very first things that happened when I first spoke to Brooks is he said, he asked me, are you in contact with Melanie? Because it's been a long time since we've spoken to each other. To which I replied, yes, I am. And he asked me with the most beautiful sincerity if I would relay to her, please tell Melanie that every time she was in the studio and I was recording her, I cried. And he said, you can tell her that because it's true. I never said it to her because it was unprofessional for me to say that at the time. But, now that all these years have passed, just please let her know that's what her music meant to me. With that, I'd like to present a few words from Brooks Arthur himself. I'm glad to hear such warm words and a good response to what you heard. That's very reassuring.
You're very welcome, man. The tapes never lie.
Yeah, so it must have been amazing to hear her live.
Oh, it was the best. It was the best. And the audience was interacting with her at that time,
Yeah. Did you ever go to England with them?
I went to England. She did a show I'll never forget it. She did a show called at the Theatre Royale, Drury Lane.
Yeah.
I don't recall if we recorded it or not. We must have recorded one. That was obviously the only reason for me to go there. Then I flew back to LA, and I was meeting with Janis Ian, and we had a show to do that night in LA. And I was so tired, I fell asleep at the dining table.
Oh my God!
I'll never forget that. That's how I remember Theatre Royale, Drury Lane, because I went there literally for an overnight show, recorded, just did sound, I don't recall, and then took the plane back and started to work with Janis.
Wow, that's cool. And we do have that recording, and it has the incredible string band on it.
That's right.
And it has a song that Mike Herron wrote just for that performance that he sings with Melanie, and it just rips your heart out. It's so beautiful.
Wow.
Yeah, really amazing.
So it is the Theatre Royale, correct?
It absolutely is. It's the Theatre Royale on Drury Lane, and it's when...
Man, you got to send me that stuff down the line, or we'll work on it or something,
They saw or heard me singing somewhere, tuning my guitar. Knock once, I got 10 minutes, and every night's the same. Sometimes I wish I wasn't in it when I hear them call my name.
I'm really dusting off the history books now, talking about the 2019 beginnings of Article 27 Music LLC at my home in Oregon. And it's been fun comparing notes with you, and I hope that I brought the story to you in a not boring way as humanly can be achieved. I also want to read Article 27 of the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights to you. The last time I read it on this Music on the Open Road podcast was on episode 2. And Article 27 music gets its name from the 27th human right. If you were to ask the question, what are human rights? There are 30 universal human rights that were written down in 1945 and ratified in the United Nations in 1948 as one of its forming documents. These are the human rights that are protected by the United Nations, and the document is called the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So when I first was listening to Melanie, I thought, we need to find some source reference that is the stable piece of information that we will use to follow through and get this problem resolved. At first, when she expressed to me what was happening, I thought, well, these are copyright violations because she is the sole songwriter and composer of the melody of all of these great pieces of work that are now being used. She's also the recording artist herself, and she paid for the recording. So she is a copyright holder. She hasn't assigned her copyrights to anybody. She's never sold her copyrights to anybody. So at first I looked at the Constitution, Article 8, Section 8 of the Constitution that deals with copyright. And it is a constitutional right that you do as a citizen have copyright protection. But I felt like with the Constitution, you can get into more like a legal battle, and I don't like fighting. So I eventually started thinking about my knowledge of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and I remembered different presentations I had seen on it and presentations I had given about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in the course of my life, and that's sort of when everything fell into place. The bells went off. Article 27, Human Right 27, that sums up what agony Melanie is experiencing, because that comes from a human rights abuse, that feeling of betrayal, that feeling that something is wrong, and by an honest person, a person who's put in a hard day's work. They feel something's wrong. Most likely, if they're a productive, good person, there is something wrong. And that's what was real for me. So I thought, if there's any place that I can put my own feet on the ground on this one and my shoulder up against the wheel, I could probably help a lot of artists who feel very bad about similar things, the way that Melanie feels so bad about being trampled on. So Human Right 27, Part 1 reads, everyone has the right to participate in the cultural life of the community, to enjoy the arts, and to share in scientific advancement and its benefits. That's Part 1. Part 2 reads, everyone has the right to the protection of the moral and material interests resulting from any scientific, literary, or artistic production of which he is the author. I just kept thinking Melanie could do so much more to produce her music, to bring her music to the fans, to reissue music, if she was receiving the cash that her library is generating today without any interference from companies that control the routes and channels of business within the industry.
When I hear them call my name, same people all around me, and
Why does Melanie believe that she should be paid when the entire industry is not paying her? And I will go into the depths of I will break through the bottom layers of discretion in the next episode, A Man Called Schikarek, which is about Peter Schikarek, and we'll talk about the actual betrayal that occurred against the Schikarek family. But for now, I just want to conclude episode 5 by saying that there is always an answer findable. For example, sometimes I listen to myself and I sound like I am a Valley girl, but I was born in Seattle and I was raised in Oregon. But I lived in California for 11 years, and that becomes stamped on your soul, I guess. I spent many hours stuck in traffic in the Valley, so there you go, on the 405 and the 101 to the 134. So you know what? I also learned early on that not everyone cares so much about music, because a lot of the focus in the United States today is on money and acquiring businesses instead of helping small business survive in a cost-effective manner. So in order to stay afloat, we have to balance our outgoing expenditures, and we have to be reasonable about market values. And one thing that happens to great artists is that the numbers are not relayed ethically to them. So they can't really see where the money is coming from, what art is reaching their public and bringing the money back to them, so that then they can, decide on their own what they want to do next. And that's really the crux of the matter. An artist is a bit like a small mom and pop business. That's how I see it. I don't know if you agree with me, but most artists come up through the ranks having to make every decision on their own, some fairly important ones too. So they shouldn't be denied just the straight information about what is happening with their music when it hits the marketplace. And maybe just putting in these points of decency and backing that up by the support of the law will enable all Americans to know that their 27th human right is protected in the music arena.
Knock once, I got 10 minutes, and every night's the same. Sometimes I wish I wasn't in it when I hear them call my name, same people.
Music interludes at the beginning portion of today's podcast came to Music on the Open Road directly from a transfer of those 50 or so year old original Neighborhood record audio reels. Performances by Melanie in this episode are from original audio reels from her record label, Neighborhood Records. For the most up-to-date news and music from Melanie, connect with her directly on her website, melaniesafka.com, through her social media, Melanie and Safka on Instagram, and both Melanie or Melanie Safka on Facebook. Credits for today's episode are myself, Corinne Sullivan, who lived the content I speak of. I conducted interviews with Melanie, transferred the music, wrote and edited this series here in Willamina, Oregon. As was seldom mentioned before, I am always sending my love to Melanie. She's the star of everything presented in this season, and I hope she goes down in history as the artist who inspired a movement that protected songwriters, musicians, and performers forevermore.
I'm thinking what I'm doing, and I'm thinking what I done, and I'm thinking about my mother, who never thought I'd come quite this far from nowhere to hear myself be sung, but I still haven't forgotten I used to do it just for fun, when all the ones around me would wonder if they saw or heard me singing somewhere tuning my guitar. Knock once, I got 10 minutes, and every night's the same. Sometimes I wish I wasn't in it. When I hear them call my name, same people all around me, and I wonder who they are. I know they're not my family, and they're not my friends by far. They're all the ones around me who wonder who they are. They hide behind my curtain, and they hope I'll be a star. And they say, get out and sell them, but selling's not my aim. I wanna sing the life I'm living and try to ease the pain of all the ones around me, no matter who they are. They hide and they look uncertain, but they hope I'll be a star. And all the ones all around me, I don't care who you are. Tonight you're gonna hold the curtain. I'm tuning my guitar. All the ones around me. Who do you think you are? Tonight you're gonna hold the curtain. I'm tuning my guitar. It isn't right. We never met before, but then we may never meet again. If I weren't afraid you'd laugh at me, I would run and take all your hands, and I'll gather everyone together for a day. And when we're gathered, I'll pass buttons out that say, beautiful people. And then you'll never have to be alone, 'cause there'll always be someone with the same button on as you. Include him in everything you do. Beautiful people, you ride the same subway as I do every morning. That's gotta tell you something. We got so much in common. I go the same direction that you do. So if you take care of me, maybe I'll take care of you. Beautiful people,